Well, TV fans, he's the latest composer to tackle the Star Wars universe, scoring Disney Plus's new series, The Mandalorian. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby, and I'm excited to sit here with Ludwig Goransson. Ludwig, obviously the world of Star Wars has become sort of synonymous with John Williams because he's created these iconic themes that have lived off and on for years. So how do you sort of confront that when you're assigned this job? Do you want to mimic that, or is there pressure to be vastly different? How do you sort of interact with that legacy?
Well, it's, like you said, like Star Wars and John Williams is kind of like the essence of film score in a way. Like when everyone thinks of film music, you think about Star Wars. You think about that thing. You think about that's one of the pieces of music that almost everyone knows. And entering that world, there was a lot of pressure from my side, just like, there's a lot to live up to, and I know how much of an impact that had to me when I was a kid, like listening to that music, and how that made me feel, how excited I got and inspired I got from that music. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to try to give that back to kids today. I want to create the same kind of feel and impact musically to give those emotions that I had as a kid. But fortunately enough for me, working with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, they were extremely just supportive, and from the get-go, like Jon Favreau was like, I want you to do something new. We want a new approach with this music. We want to take the audience to new places that haven't been before. So already from the get-go, he kind of, he made me feel very confident.
Yeah. What the cool thing is that it sounds very different from what we associate normally with Star Wars, which is fitting because The Mandalorian, all of it feels a little bit different from normal Star Wars things. And what stood out to me is kind of the Western elements. There's just sort of this lone gunslinger kind of vibe to the whole thing. And I'm curious, did that come out only after watching the scenes, or where did you get the inspiration to do that kind of Western element to it?
Well, it came out from reading the scripts and like understanding that it's a one-man journey. You're following this guy, the Mandalorian, throughout his journey, and it's only one story. There's no side stories. It's his story. You follow him on the journey, and John, and had creative conversations with John about, what was his inspiration when he was writing the script, when he was writing the story, and a lot of his inspiration came from like the samurai films, like Kurosawa movies, and so I went back and listened to all those, and I obviously went back and listened to early Morricone scores, and somehow I was just I was drawn to the recorder. I bought a set when I started writing the music. I bought a set of recorders. I knew I wanted to take a break from the computer, because I wanted to play. I wanted to play instruments, and I bought a set of recorders that I used to play when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and it came with 5 different recorders, 5 different sizes, and I grabbed the biggest one first, and I just closed myself off in the studio and just started playing these recorders and experimenting with sounds, and one sound led me to another sound. The recorder led me to the piano, led me to the guitar, and I just had everything set up really easily so I can just walk around these instruments almost like I was a kid again, playing and having fun. So yeah, that's how I started my composing for this show.
Yeah, the recorder that ends up becoming a really big piece of Mando's theme in the show, and I'm wondering kind of because there's so many like character themes. Do you break things down by character when you are scoring, or do you more get an image of the overall tone and sound you want for the whole thing?
First of all, it was important for me to create the sound of the show, the soundscape of the show.
Yeah.
And I would describe that in three elements. The first element I started with was the organic sounds, like I just described, like playing these instruments, piano, guitar, drums, and playing it all myself, and then just created this organic soundscape with melodies. And I wrote about 5 songs. I wrote 5 songs, 5-minute long, just based on the script. I had in my head, I had the theme for the Mandalorian, I had a theme for some of the planets, for the baby, for the Razor Crest, and I wrote 5 songs. And the other element that I implemented after I wrote these songs was the tech element, which is kind of which represents kind of the urban dirty, the gritty edge, the edginess of the show. And then the third element of the score I would say is the orchestra, which is kind of tying everything together and also brings out the soul of Star Wars.
Yeah. How big of an orchestra do you get with this? Because I was wondering that, because it does have this mix of organic elements and some tech elements. How many instruments are we talking when you record this?
The orchestra was about 74 people orchestra. And we recorded it in LA with LA recording musicians.
Yeah.
And for every week we had a 2-day recording session, and which is, so every episode we did different recording sessions for, and that was extremely, that was so fun, just hearing your music coming alive. And that's always one of my favorite parts of scoring a show or a film.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of the score was the Mudhorn attack music, because I love the score feels very malleable. It has a distinct tone, and we're going for the Western samurai element, but then all of a sudden the Mudhorn comes out and there's these sounds that are like violent drumming, and on its surface it seems like it wouldn't fit in, but somehow it seems to still be incorporated within the soundscape. So how do you go about kind of putting in a surprise like that, where there's a very different sound coming through but still making it part of the whole?
Well, that's an interesting question, because that was a lot of things comes out of just experimentation and just like almost mistakes sometimes. Like I remember recording just toms and hitting the tom, and just like had 3 percussion players, and I just all told them to play 16th notes really fast. And I didn't know what to use that for, but having 3 people in the same room just playing that really loud just was with that intensity was really cool. And that was like that was like 2 months before I even saw the second episode. And when I saw the second episode, with the Mudhorn coming out, the big force of nature and just breaking everything in front of him, I remembered in my head, okay, I had those crazy drums that let me try to bring that into this scene, and it kind of gave it this crazy power that really worked. And then I infused that with some more elements of the show with like the orchestra. I infused it with some more crazy distorted tech elements, because I wanted this sound to be something, a force that you never really heard before. So
yeah, it worked out very well. I'm always wondering where creatives kind of get like their initial inspiration. Do you find that it's just a lot of experimenting like that, or do you sort of work off of images, or does it all come from the script?
It's different. I mean, I'm trying to, for every project I do, I try to have a different mindset. And I think I told you a little earlier in this interview, when I started on The Mandalorian, I wanted to take a step away from computers. I've scored a bunch of films and never taken a break, and I felt like I needed to take a step away from the screen, because you're sitting there hours and hours in front of a computer screen, and I was at a point in my life where like, okay, I need to take a break from the screen. So I set up my studio with just instruments, and it became a little meditative. Like I was and I bought these flutes, the recorders. There's actually an album that really inspired me, called Spirits by Keith Jarrett, which I've been listening to throughout my life. And it's an album that he had hit a wall in his career, and he was depressed and he couldn't move, and he didn't even touch the piano for months. And his I think his wife bought him a little four-channel cassette recorder and a bunch of flutes and some drums and percussive instruments, and he just started meditating and coming back into his music by just making some songs by playing, little drums and flutes. And that album is called Spirits, and is really it's one of my favorite albums, because it's so spiritual. So I think why I was kind of drawn to the flutes and to the recorders was I think from listening a lot to that album. And so my journey when it was started was to get away from the computer and just surround myself with instruments, but because that kind of also reminded me of my childhood a little bit. That's how I used to make music, just by sitting. I had a little tape recorder. I was sitting, playing these songs and just recording myself. And so just writing music like that based on the script was how I started on Mandalorian.
Yeah. And when you're scoring for film and television, what is the process like when you have to decide when to cut the music, when the music comes in and not? Is that a long process, or do you kind of know right away?
It's so that process is called a spotting session. So that's basically you have a conversation with the director, in this case with Jon Favreau and also with Dave Filoni. We were sitting and looking at every episode and sitting and dissecting every scene and talking about, because that's also one of the things that made Star Wars so unique, like the way that George Lucas and John Williams chose to have the music come in and come out, what scenes they implement score it's sometimes more important than the music, and also when to know when not to use music, because sometimes pauses and is more important than music and has more effect. So it was a very careful, carefully, it was a very carefully executed process with me and John and David talking about exactly where the music should come in and out and how to use it, because if you don't get it right, it might actually hurt more than make it better.
And for this show, you released basically a whole album for each episode of the music. And I'm wondering, like, if you think of film versus TV, do you have to think of the score for these as like a bunch of mini movies? Is that at all in your mindset, or is it just one big long story to you?
It's kind of both. I tackle this project like I would have done with a movie. And with that being said, like I wrote so much music for this show. It's 8 episodes, and I think I wrote about 4 or 5 hours of music that's actually made it into the show. But it is different than a movie because it is episodic. So it's 8 episodes, and every episode has its own story and own different character and takes place on different planets and different environments. So I also wanted to tailor and give each episode its own unique flair, with either its themes or either its instrumentation. So that's why, when I finished the show and I was looking back at it, I was like, well, the best way to release the music would be to do eight releases per episode, yeah, I never done anything like this before, and it was very challenging, but I learned so much, and I'm happy I put a lot of work into it, and it was extremely it took a lot of time and a lot of energy, but looking back at it now, it was a lot of fun and very rewarding, working with John.
Yeah. Well, regarding your film career, I should mention before I let you go, there is one great movie that got you a lot of success, which was Black Panther, which you won an Oscar for and a Grammy. And you were nominated alongside a lot of really established names. And, that category often goes to someone older. They sort of have these people who are really celebrated composers, and you were alongside them. What was that like for you when they called your name? What were you thinking?
I was definitely not expecting to win, because I've been that was my first year doing like these award shows, and it was almost like a full-time job. Like you go into these cocktail like you have to do Q&As, you have to do a lot of interviews, so it's takes a lot of energy and a lot of focus. And I have done, I think it was the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice Awards before the Oscars, and I didn't win any of them. So I just was prepared to have the same kind of feeling out of the Oscars. But so when they called my name, I wasn't surprised, because I saw Tessa. I know Tessa and Michael B. Jordan because I worked with them on numerous movies, on Creed, and also Michael B. Jordan was a part of Black Panther. So actually, when Tessa opened the envelope and I saw like her face kind of lit up, I kind of knew that it was mine in there before she said it, because she seemed happy. But it was very surreal. I can't fully remember exactly what happened, but yeah.
Well, it's a great accomplishment and fantastic work on The Mandalorian. So we wish you the best of luck with all of that. And everyone who's watching out there, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby and keep up to date with us throughout Emmy season. Ludwig, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.